I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this episode is being recorded and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Welcome to Can I Get a Refill? The podcast that offers a nurturing and inspirational space for honest and open discussions around career aspirations, wealth creation, motherhood, healthy relationships with others and the self, as well as an emphasis on physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Join us for lighthearted, authentic chats with like-minded women, as well as more in-depth discussions with industry professionals to support your ambitions and heal old wounds, as we empower you to regularly fill up your own cup. I'm your host, Steph Bruno-Newton, singer, writer, podcast host, mum, and recovering people pleaser. Thank you for pressing play today, and now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Can I Get a Refill podcast. We're very lucky to be joined in today's episode by Integrative Mindfulness and Mindset Practitioner Sammy Wynn. Sammy's business, The Still Space, offers a variety of services to support families and takes an integrative and forward-thinking approach to mental health and well-being, tailoring a range of multi-modality therapeutic services to guide children, teens, individuals and families through life's challenges. As mental and emotional well-being are at the height of my values, I was so excited to sit down with Sammy and discuss mindfulness, self-discovery, and overcoming trauma. Okay, now let's jump in. Hello and welcome back to the Can I Get a Refill podcast. As just promised, we're here with a very special guest today, Sammy Wynn from The Still Space. Sammy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah, as you said, it's been a little while that we've been wanting to do this, and I had a little scrapbook before I even bought the equipment to start this podcast, and I shortlisted about 7 names of who I want, and you were on that list because I've always watched your page, and I'm like, that's what I'm about. I think the audience is really going to connect with it like I do as well. So we'll jump straight into some questions today. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little about your business, The Still Space, and what inspired you to create it.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So The Still Space is really a business that supports people throughout the lifespan. So I offer counselling and mindfulness sort of based therapies as well.
Is it you yourself counselling or you've got...
Yeah.
Great.
I'm doing the counselling. So if you want sort of the title, it's like counsellor and integrative mindfulness practitioner. And really the story of how I started my business actually came out of my own sort of trauma and tragedy. I actually started my business after I lost my father.
Oh.
So lost him unexpectedly.
When was that? How old?
It was 2009.
Okay.
That's
few
young years
to
ago.
Lose a
Yes,
parent.
I was young. He was only 64. So at that time, I always call it like my bottom of the shower moment, like just sitting on the bottom of that shower. I just remember that absolute devastation. And obviously at the time I was going through my own grief journey, but on that journey, something that really supported me was obviously getting my own mental health support.
Yeah.
But one thing that was really significant was meditation. And it was a place that I could go for reprieve, for connection, for self-soothing, to reconnect with my father.
And it wasn't a very mainstream topic. It was sort of just starting to get momentum at that time. I remember that's when I started doing meditation courses, but no one really talked about it in the 90s. It's something that's really gaining momentum more and more.
Absolutely. So definitely now it's more mainstream and you see a lot more westernized modalities.
Yes.
But when I started, it was still becoming mainstream, but definitely it wasn't where it is now.
Yeah.
But I am someone that's always had a sort of spirituality component to my personality. It's something I relate to and have connected with most of my life. And interestingly, I grew up with my mum who was very spiritual and meditated. So this would have been way back in the years where it was seen as, the hippies were the ones that were doing meditation.
I was just going to say, it's mainstream now, but people always did it, but it was always seen as the woo-woo people did it. And now... CEOs are doing it.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the way and the reason why it's become so mainstream is because now we have the science to back it up.
Yes.
And
A lot of neurologists are speaking on podcasts. Lewis Howes, do you listen to his podcast?
Yeah, exactly. So we now have science. They've done a lot of imaging of the brain, of the body for meditators versus non-meditators, and there's so much research out there. And I think in the West, we value that science more so than Eastern, where they're more spiritual, intuitive. And I think that's why it's taken longer to be sort of mainstream in the West. So out of that journey myself, I came out of that and I really realised life is too short to not do something I'm passionate about. Absolutely. So I had previously been in corporate in a marketing consultant role for one of the top financial services firms here in Australia.
Wow.
Totally changed my life. Went down this path of study and really diving deep into meditation and these supportive practices, and just took the leap and started my business. And since starting it about 5 years ago, I've done obviously further training to get qualified as a counsellor. From my story, it'll make sense why I specialise in trauma, grief and loss. And
I do want to get into trauma. It's a hot topic to talk about. It's funny that you mention that, because every single time I talk about female entrepreneurs or any podcast I listen to of people that the common threads are, I started in corporate, I had burnout, or I've had trauma. And I just feel like, the people that have been fed by the silver spoon have never really created anything like that, because they sort of haven't known struggle. Or I just feel the most beautiful things and your sense of purpose comes from a place of trauma or burnout. So I just find every time I talk to people, I smiled when you said it, because I'm like, it's just the common thread all the time.
100%, because I think until you've gone through something significant like that, and you don't have to have gone through something significant to have purpose and passion.
No, but it shakes you up. It shakes you to the core.
When you are faced with your own mortality as a result of losing someone so under traumatic circumstances so quickly overnight, it makes you realise how fragile life is. And it's confronting. It's confronting to be faced with that fragility of life. But on the other side of it, you can take that and you can really use it to motivate you and push you forward into what you want to do in life.
Absolutely. And I've said this recently to my husband. I said, when people go through something really traumatic or a big accident, I feel like there's two types of people. They either submit to it and then give up, or they, I've got his book somewhere, Nick Vukic or something, where he's got no limbs at all, but he's just a motivational speaker, the most inspiring person. Some people just go the complete opposite direction and are like, right, this is the shake-up I needed to really make something of my life. So,
It's so true. It's so cliche, but we get one life and it's short. It is short.
It's so short.
And
I didn't realise.
It's like, and it's scary. I have those moments where you get that anxiety of like, wow, I'm coming up to 40. Am I halfway through my life? This is...
Well, my goal is to live to at least 90, because my grandparents all died in the 80s. So I'm like, I'll be 42 in June. So I'm like, I always picture it as a graph of the incline, and I'm like, is the peak 45 and then it's all down? But I'm finding beautiful things in each decade. So,
of course.
The energy wasn't there. I tried to run on the treadmill this morning and it was just so hard. It wasn't that hard 5 years ago, but I'm finding all beautiful things in different stages of life. But you're right, it is fleeting, and it's really important to be doing something that's of importance to you. And we'll get into more to why the meditation. But one of the nicest compliments I've ever received is that I'm very self-aware. I loved that compliment. So why do you think it's so important for all of us to have a strong sense of self?
I feel that your sense of self is at the centre of your whole life. It dictates your relationship with yourself, but it dictates your relationship with everyone else in your life. You can think about it, it's actually like the glasses through which you see your whole world.
I couldn't agree more.
So if you have a strong, solid, healthy, compassionate, loving sense of self, that is the lens through which you see the world. But if you have an inner critic, that low confidence...
Other people mirror it.
Yeah, and it makes it harder for you to connect, right? We are wired to connect and attach. We know this through attachment theory. From the minute we are born, even in utero, we are wired to attach. However, if we don't have a strong sense of self, if we don't love ourselves, if we don't have that confidence or that lens that says the world is a safe place to connect with others, and this will probably feed into a little bit more about trauma later, then it can totally impact the way that we see the world and the way that we show up in the world.
I totally agree. And again, it's something that wasn't talked about a lot before, but every time I see like people I love struggling, I'm like, it's starting from within, but that they're looking external, and I just feel like it's the wrong way to do it. And I know with me years ago, I had low self-esteem and I would have unhealthy relationships, and it was the second I gave up on looking for someone else, I always used to say to myself, no one's coming to save you. It was all up to me to... And once I saw myself, and I did meditation courses and really worked on myself, and once I saw myself like someone I wanted to be friends with, like a real appreciation of myself, I could see other people mirroring that, and then the right people, I was on their radar. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's, when we have a strong sense of self, there's two things that we can do really well. So, and this is probably 2 questions to ask yourself. Can I set clear boundaries for my own well-being? Boundaries is a huge one, and you might notice that they're lacking if you don't have a strong sense of self. So that's probably the first area to have a look. And then the second question is, can I be compassionate with myself? Can I be tender and loving with myself even when I know I'm going to stuff up, I'm going to make mistakes, we're human beings? Can I still bring compassion to myself?
Because we do seem harder on ourselves than others. And then do you think that sense of compassion for yourself then helps you to have more compassion for others?
Absolutely. I think it's really hard. There's this beautiful quote, and I forget who it's by, but it's so amazing. And it says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete.
Oh, I love that.
And it's so great. So I can get you the name and you can pop
Google
it in the notes.
It's already mentally going on my Insta for my next quote post.
And I share this all the time with my clients when we're doing this work around compassion and self-care. And it is, if you can be compassionate for everybody else, but you can't show yourself that same compassion, that's where the work is. Is that because it's easy to be compassionate for other people. Most people probably find they can do that. They can be compassionate to their children, a loved one, but to themselves.
I see it a lot. I see it all the
challenge.
Time. But I just wasn't taught to us when we were kids. But I had a lady on who works with children in schools, and she said you'd be surprised how much that's improved in schools now. They do a lot of meditation or self-work. And I was like, well, that's really good, because that just was not taught to us when we were kids. I like that your services seem to be so inclusive of the whole family and all different generations and children throughout different stages of their lives. What do you find to be some of the biggest obstacles facing the well-being of families in today's society? And what are some of the services you do to work through that with them? Yeah,
I would say probably the 2 biggest things is just time and attachment. So attachment is huge, and it's so many parents are stretched, they're busy, they're stressed, they're dysregulated themselves. So what I'm seeing
more
in
so
families,
than previous generations.
Oh, completely.
We're taking on a lot more.
Even since when I started my business, I've seen a huge increase in this. Post-COVID, there's been a huge increase in stress because, as we know, prolonged stress lives in the body, right? So unless we're doing the work to repair that and heal that. And then the way that this impacts families, if you've got 2 parents who are dysregulated, and the reality is in a modern day life, that's the case. Yeah. And there's no judgment there. No. This is society's pressure on parents. So if you have 2 dysregulated parents, then they're not able to show up and provide that co-regulation that children need. So children need co-regulation throughout their whole lifespan.
Okay.
So originally the belief was that they probably need it, the first 5, 7 years. Actually, what we find is we co-regulate our whole lifetime in all of our relationships.
Right.
So we also co-regulate with our partners as we become adults. Yeah. So that lack of co-regulation is a really, really huge one, which is as a result of dysregulated parents and then not having that time together to form attachment.
Okay.
The second one is really just parents themselves who have their own traumas and who have their own past experiences that aren't emotionally available in the way that they would love to be. They would absolutely love to be. And as we know, their experiences, it comes to an unconscious level now. They're not consciously not wanting to connect and love.
But this is my issue with parents not solving, I'm not saying solve it, but go seek treatment, go seek help, go talk to a psychologist and heal. The little child within you needs to heal, or it's just going to pass through. And as you said, it's not even consciously passing through. I go to a spiritual healer. I don't know if you know Kai from Ojanata. She's going to come on the show. And there's all this trauma that's literally in your body that she can see and tell you things that you didn't even know about past generations. So it might not have even happened to you and past generations are passing through. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and And once again, you know, if you look in the trauma literature, this is what the science shows, intergenerational trauma. Even from in utero, we see if the mother was stressed throughout pregnancy, it impacts the baby. So, you know, once again, no blame or shame, but if you have a call or a feel within yourself that there's something that's just blocking that connection, or there is a trauma that you haven't yet addressed, it's so important for anyone, not just parents, but especially for parents, because it's not until you have healed your own trauma that you can show up and provide secure attachment for a child.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as you said, the pressures on parents are immense. The external pressures are insane. But no one's going to be perfect. There's no handbook, but you want to give your kids the best possible clean slate start they can. And I would personally agree that working on yourself and healing your traumas before you fall pregnant is a really great way to start, so they have a fresh start.
Totally. And I think, you know, healing is an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
We don't, especially with really deep ingrained trauma, we don't just sort of go to a counsellor a few times and all of a sudden the trauma's not there anymore. It's always part of I like to say it's the fabric of who we are.
Yes.
It's part of us. It always will be. But obviously through going and getting that mental health support, we could recognise patterns and behaviours and thoughts more clearly so that we are more likely to not sort of pass them on or have that impact those attachment bonds that we want to really build with our children.
It's ongoing. It's never fixed. You never get the final service on your car. You continue to service your cars. And I think continuing to service your emotions is a really good thing. I'm glad you said that, because I've been dying to talk in any podcast about Britney Spears, a pop culture reference, purely because everyone was Team Britney when she was in the conservatorship. Everyone wanted help. Then she got out of it and everyone's like, oh, she's still crazy. Why is she still doing those dancing videos? And I get so frustrated because the girl had trauma for 13 years, was slipped lithium into her food by her father, controlled no adult control over any area of her life. And people think when the conservatorship ended, she should be better. And I get so angry. I'm like, can you understand that is severe trauma for a very prolonged period of time, that person needs ongoing support?
Absolutely. And that is a perfect example of society with this idea of quick fixes.
Click your
right?
fingers.
It's just the conservatorship. Once that's done,
she should be
fine.
better.
Yeah.
But that's society in general. There's no such thing as delayed gratification. Everything, like I've always worked in customer service, you know, centered roles. And I have just noticed a complete shift in people's demeanour, because people used to be able to wait for things. And now when you can order something from Amazon in the morning and have it at your door at 5 p.m, no one knows how to be patient for anything. Everyone expects that quick solution to everything, which is why I was saying to you, you know, if there's illnesses, I always believe in going to your doctors, doing that, but also a holistic approach. And I go to naturopaths or, you know, because people want to pop a pill and be better. And I'm like, no, are you meditating? Are you spending time in nature? You know, are you having sleep? What's your holistic approach? People want a quick fix.
Absolutely. And our culture and our society, because everything is at the flick of a switch, you know, you can order food
Click
in,
of a button.
you know, an hour. That is keeping us all dysregulated, because we are constantly in this state of move. Our body is like a sponge. Right? Yeah. It takes in everything, not just consciously through the mind, through the senses, through everything we're seeing, we're feeling, we're interacting with. So we are living within a society that collectively is dysregulated.
It's seeking a dopamine hit, don't you think? Don't you think that's why we reach for our phones and see how many likes? You need that dopamine hit.
And dopamine's addictive.
It's addictive.
Yeah, dopamine is addictive.
Yeah.
And once we get our dopamine externally from things like that, like phones, addictions, anything like that, then we need more and more and more of it to feel good.
Okay,
right?
and that's all external,
Escalates.
and meditation is internal. So you're regulating yourself through something like meditation or time in nature.
Yeah, I think nature is very interesting because it has natural healing abilities. So anyone that's gone for a walk and just got out barefoot on the grass or at the beach, you probably just feel that sense of like, you know, it's a natural exhale. And that's because of all the minerals and all the beautiful properties in nature. Where I find the most benefit for meditation from my experience with my clients and my personal experience is that it gives you space to actually explore what's going on for you. So
checking in with yourself.
And reconnecting to your body.
Okay, so I'm always
It's
saying
huge.
get out of your head and into your body, because I see everyone in the future, what's next. And the second you go in, I used to do this great meditation where you would run through every organ in your body and, flow oxygen through your liver and then smile through your liver. And, oh, my Lord, did I feel so myself at the end of it. I just felt safe.
It's like, I just say it's, you got to think about meditation as it's time to honor you, and this is something that you're doing for yourself because you deserve it, and you're reconnecting to your body. It's not to say you're not going to be in your mind, because that's another.
You can't shut off thoughts.
I love to bust that myth of you will think in meditation. It doesn't mean you're not getting the benefits from meditation. So
that's why people stop, because they get frustrated because they can't stop the thoughts.
And why would we expect that when we have an amazing mind that thinks, plans, synthesizes all day? That's what it's designed to do. It's not suddenly going to go, okay, we'll just switch off now. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful part of our bodies.
Have you found that with your clients, with yourself, with ongoing regular meditation, that you have the ability to adapt to stressful situations better and not? Because I know when I slip off and stop my meditation practices, or if I hadn't had enough sleep, I'm reactive to everything, and I'm Sicilian, so I have a bit of a temper. So I'll snap at things, whereas if I'm rested and I'm doing my meditation, I stop and I think, okay, and I try and see things from the other perspective, and I'm able to deal with it better. Do you find that meditation's a way to deal with those stressful situations
Absolutely.
better?
And from my experience, the two ways that it's helping with that is obviously one, through some beautiful breath practices that can, and it doesn't always have to be breath, but we're basically, lowering that stress hormone in the body. We're lowering cortisol. So we know on a biological level that there's shifts and changes in the body. We're changing brain waves, we're changing chemicals, all of that.
And as you said,
happening.
there's all this science
it's
information.
absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So on a biological level, an internal physiological level, things are shifting to make you feel calmer, so you're not as reactive. But what I also see, and in my clients and in myself, is that when we give ourselves the space in meditation to acknowledge how we're feeling, when we give challenging emotions space and acknowledgement, they will naturally dissipate on their own.
Okay, and that's what we never did before. We found a way to escape them. People will drink. People will have sex. I just found that everyone tried to escape. I'm feeling a bad emotion. I need to cover it. Instead, you should sit with it.
Totally.
It's only something I've recently discovered of sitting with it is way healthier than trying to escape it or cover it over with something.
And that's why we do lose our temper, right? Because that is a result of suppressing maybe something that happened 2 days ago that you didn't acknowledge. And, you can think about it like a bit of a jack in the box, right? So it's just simmering, building up because it hasn't been recognised and acknowledged.
Yes.
And then it gets to a point where you feel that you've just blown your stack.
Yes.
But actually that's just the end result of a whole maybe week of things that have been left unacknowledged.
I say this all the time. My husband doesn't have great conflict resolution. I feel that his whole family are sweep under the rug. Let's not talk about, love them, not criticizing, but observing that no one's talking in a calm manner when something goes wrong. It's either block people, run away, don't talk about it, sweep it under the rug. So anytime and we don't fight, but anytime there's something, I can see it on his face. I can read his face. I'm like, I can see you're upset about something. Just tell me now, because it's going to come up later, and I hate resentment. And I read a lot of Louise Hay, and I think that resentment builds illnesses in the body. I like to deal with it now, because when it comes up later, you're going to be a lot angrier if it's days or weeks later. So,
crystal clear communication always between all family members.
And that's something
huge.
that you help families with.
And knowing that can be with children too, at a level that is appropriate for their age and stage. But I think a lot in families we see that those conversations are happening with children in earshot, not including them. And it's very, very stressful, because children, they have the most amazing minds and creativity and imagination. So if they're only hearing part of a conversation, in their mind, they're making up a whole story of what might be going on.
As we do.
Yeah, as we all do. So crystal clear communication, even with children, is a really beautiful way to be in a family. And it's not to say that you still won't lose your top. I'm a mum. I get it.
That's okay.
I
Yep.
still lose my cool.
Yep.
But
I did this morning.
yeah, we do, right? And then when we communicate that to our children of, I lost my cool, this is why, have that crystal clear communication of what you were feeling and why you lost your cool, then they can understand, oh, okay, now I know that response.
Sammy, I love that you said that. I love this whole theory of inclusion of children in decision making.
Yeah.
And, like, you're still running the household. I don't want people to get the wrong idea if I'm going to let my child, be a sport brat. But I was talking to someone, the childcare worker, and we were saying that even when he's tiny, I pull out 2 outfits and I'm like, which one would you like to wear? It's sort of giving him a sense of independence by having input. Now, Alan and I never fight, but we had words the other day. Parenthood, we never fought we've been together 10 years, never fought at all. And then all of a sudden with parenthood, I can see me getting snicky. Yeah, because you're sort of like your teammates and
and you're tired.
So we were having words in front of him and we've never done it. This child laughs, you ask anyone in my family, laughs and smiles all the time because I'm always dancing and laughing with him. And he picked up and those words weren't friendly. They weren't bad, but it was just and it was like this, like his whole demeanour went, and he was looking from one to one. And I sat and I said, it's okay, Baba. I go, we're just, trying to sort something out. Mum and Dad weren't agreeing on something, so we just wanted to get to the bottom of it. And I could see, he didn't understand my words, but he understood that I was assuring him that the situation was okay. And I was like, I don't want to have any fights in front of my children. But if, things like that happen, I want to include them and explain so they understand why.
Yeah. And this comes back to my point before about we receive our world on a sensory level. So this is a perfect example.
Especially if you're more of an empath like myself, you absorb.
100%.
Yeah.
But like we all do, right? We're full sensory beings. So even though your child might not on a cognitive level understand the language, because we're wired to attach, they pick up on body language.
Absolutely.
They're sensing a shift in energy. Yeah. So it's this idea that if children don't yet talk, that they're not sort of having a sense of what's going on.
Absolutely.
Children have a sense of what's going on, and we see this a lot in families where there is, cases of even domestic violence.
Yeah.
We see that the children can be traumatized from birth.
Without a doubt.
From that, because they're still receiving that environment through their senses.
We're all running off energy. I had a dog that was on doggy Prozac. That dog didn't need to understand English to know when people were having work like that. It's energy. Every being is picking up energy.
We feel everything and we sense everything, and it's a lot of times it's on an unconscious level.
Yeah.
But as I said, we're like sponges, and everything is an imprint into our body and our brain, whether we know it or not. We are receiving all of this data.
Listen, there's
all
been
day.
studies that if you talk to your plants and touch their leaves, they grow better. So I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
Everything is energy.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so on your website you mention, among many other methods, understanding past trauma. So trauma seems to be coming up a lot in recent years. What are some examples of past trauma that people may consciously or unconsciously be holding on to, and how can we work through the trauma?
Yeah, it's such a good question because, trauma is very much a sort of buzzword at the moment.
It is.
in society.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important to understand that there's so many different types of trauma.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can have childhood trauma from a very young age. As I said, this can happen from in utero, generational trauma. And then we can sort of have trauma later in life.
And it can be as simple as a teacher saying, oh, that was really bad work in front of your classmates. It can be very small things that you might remember for decades.
Oh, well, I'll give you my personal story around that. So in year 6, my farewell at school, I was really unwell when I was young. So I was on a lot of steroids. So I was a heavier girl.
Yeah.
And
they
I
make
remember,
you puffy.
Yeah. And I remember on my school uniform, because you write your little messages on your school uniform before you go off to high school.
I almost don't want to hear it.
And this one boy wrote on my dress, "Have fun at Jenny Craig." That was his final message on my dress in front of all my classmates. So this is an example of a trauma. To him, boy, thought it was a funny comment.
Yeah.
I have had until probably 2 years ago when I did EMDR, and that can be a whole nother conversation.
I don't even know what that is, so I'll come back to that.
So I have always had body image issues my whole life from that point on.
Absolutely.
So that is an example of a childhood trauma that has carried through my whole life. I've had therapy on and off for it, but it wasn't until I did a recent EMDR therapy that I sort of really got to the nuts and bolts of it and sort of could move past it. So that's an example of a trauma that could happen.
Body image is huge with women, and I always thought you'd be over it by a certain age. I'm seeing women in their older age, I can't go swimming, you know, I don't want people to see me. I'm like, imagine if you were like 80, missing what could be your last swim because you're worried what people... And that's so... Like, it breaks my heart because I get body image something severe. But I was in dancing, and I think there was just too much emphasis placed on how you look too. But then, having said that, nearly all girls I know, I want to share really quick with you my primary school among many primary school traumas. I have a neuromuscular disorder. It's a rigidity of muscles. I'll show you an example later. So they go really stiff, and then it takes a long time to relax. So, you know, getting up off the couch, I look like Frankenstein. But once I'm warmed up, I used to be a dancer, or I can run in the gym, but it just takes a long time to warm up the muscles. Once I'm stationary for 60 seconds, they go cold. I didn't have a name for it till I was 28. Didn't officially get diagnosed till last year when I was pregnant. And when I was pregnant, it exacerbated tenfold. I was on a walking stick. So it's okay. It's something I've learned to live with. But now that I have a name for it, I can just say, I have a neuromuscular disorder. I have myotonia congenita. And people are like, okay. When I was a kid, I didn't. So, you know, mum would be like, pretend you're tying up your shoe if I had to like try and warm up my legs. I had a substitute teacher tell me to run. I said, I can't. And she called me a liar, dragged me along the cement, from knee to ankle just covered in blood because she was dragging me because my muscles went stiff and I fell because I just have no control over my muscles. I didn't tell my mum till I was about 30. She was like, why didn't you tell me? I'll tell you why. Because when trauma happens to kids, you have this thing like sexual abuse victims, that it's partially your fault.
Yes.
So you feel shame. And I think shame is the worst. I've got goosebumps. It's the worst thing to scrub off you, shame. So that trauma has stuck with me for years. Duck, duck, goose. Happy game is absolute trauma for me in my brain. And same thing, I had a boy that I liked me, I didn't go out with, yelled out fat thighs in front of everyone. I hold on to that for decades.
Of course.
So it could be little, it could be huge, and I don't believe in grading trauma because I think if it's traumatic to you, it's trauma.
Exactly, and that would be my point. You know, there's a lot of talk out there about, you know, small T trauma and big T trauma.
Oh,
and
really?
I think,
they do grade them.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I think trauma is trauma, and trauma is how so you can think about trauma is how your body receives something that happened to you, and it, on whatever level, it hasn't been able to process it and cope with it.
Okay.
So exactly what you said, with a lot of children, they'll shut down.
Yep.
They'll just shut down that part of themselves.
Yep.
They'll go numb, then we get shame. That's why we see that disassociation, all of those sort of things that happen from trauma, because as a way to protect ourselves, as a way to protect our mind and our body, we shut off that part of something that happened to us for survival, for protection, because it's too overwhelming to our system to cope with.
So I hear that a lot from, you know, when you see young children that were sexually abused by parents and that they shut it off, and some people don't remember it.
Exactly. And that is your brain's and body's way of coping. And then this is why you might have people who later in life they feel settled in their life, they're happy, and then they might start getting flashbacks because their nervous system is finally in a place of safety, so it feels like it's safe enough to open that door to go back. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, and with trauma, it's very much about, you know, and a perfect example of what you went through, we can do all the mental work we like. And this is why in my business, I take a very integrative approach. I do talk therapy with other body-based interventions because we can talk our way out of anything. We can go to the logic as much as we want when it comes to our trauma. We can sit and talk to a counsellor as much as we want.
Yeah.
But until our body knows that we are safe, it will be stuck in that trauma. So recovering and healing from trauma is all about giving your body and your nervous system cues of safety so it can start processing, healing, and moving forward. And that is why, you know, it's so important to have that integrative approach. Talk therapy is fantastic, but it's one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And in terms of dealing with trauma, we need to go, when it's safe, we need to go into the body, and we need to really build an internal sense of safety so that we can sort of start working, from there on that really sensory level. Because, if anyone's read Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score,
I have heard of it.
Highly recommend. I actually was really lucky enough to do some training with him, which was exceptional. And he, in all of his books, and what he always says is that trauma is stored in the body. And that's why we have to take a body-based approach when it's safe to do so, because we also want to make sure we're not going there too quickly, because it can re-trigger things.
I have heard that.
So it's very slow, very steady, but it's all about making that body feel safe so that you can sort of start becoming unstuck from the trauma.
Oh, I love that. Everything's about safe space, isn't it? That's where you start to heal once you know you're in a safe space. Women seem to take on a lot more of their emotional burden of their immediate families and their families of origin, from what I've seen. Every woman I know has experienced some form of emotional or physical burnout. If you had to pick only one thing for women to do for their own well-being, what would it be?
Start giving yourself the space to acknowledge your own emotions.
Oh, that's good.
That's what I would do. You can do all of the yoga,
I thought you were going to say meditate, but okay.
Well, meditation is one doorway to do that. I don't like to give that as the only option, because for some people it might not work for them. You, as I said, you can do all the yoga, all the meditation you want in the world.
Yeah.
But as long as you continue to suppress your emotions, suppress how you're doing, none of that is going to work. So there's a really great quote that I love from Dr. Dan Segal, and it's called, and this is referred to a lot more in his work with children, but I love it for adults too, and it's name it to tame it.
Oh, I love that.
Name it to
like
tame
Voldemort.
it. So it's like
you take back the power.
Yeah.
Once you name it and call it out. They do this in like exorcisms.
Yeah.
I honestly think when you name something, you're taking its power away.
And we see this so a lot of his work is around regulation for children. And so obviously in the work that I do with children, a lot of it is around that self-regulation as well as co-regulation for families. But in the research we see this, if we can name how we're feeling, the intensity of how we're feeling, it's not a cure, because if we're in grief and despair and hopelessness, we're really in that. We're in the thick of it. But as soon as we can name it, it takes away the intensity, and we're then able to respond to it. So back to what we were talking about before, responding versus reacting. If we can sit down at the end of the day and go, I'm just so angry about my colleague at work, I'm so angry, and we can just acknowledge that we're angry, all of a sudden we feel,
I could not agree more with every word that comes out of your mouth. And I say this with my husband. He doesn't like to. I don't bitch. I'm not. When people gossip, I find it's negative. It brings me down. But I believe in talking out something that's bothering you, or it sits in your body and it manifests into some sort of physical ailment. And I was saying this with my friend Jess at work. She's like, me and my partner are exactly the same. We get home, we talk about it. We talk about it for like 24 hours, and then we have to drop it. Otherwise, you're just going on and on with it. And when I try to say things to my husband, you can see him just shut down and change the subject. And I'm like, let me acknowledge it. Like, I'm just here with you and a 6-month-old. Let me talk it out, because if I can't talk it to you, who can I talk? But he doesn't have the skills to deal with it. He doesn't know what to say. But or men try to fix when I really just want you to listen. I want to air my grievances to get it out, which is why I think women live longer, because we're getting it out. I totally agree. It's just a way of calling it out. And I always say, if I have disappointment or something in my life, I give myself 24 hours to lick my wounds, and then I have to just drop it and move on with the next thing. So,
and I also find, I can totally relate to what you're saying. My husband's very similar, but also, for people that love us, and I see this a lot in the grief work that I do, for them, when we're acknowledging, especially a challenging emotion, right? Because you probably might realise that your husband can sit in the joy with you all the time. The joy's great. That's a beautiful place to be, but it's the challenging emotions that, yes, they want to fix, they don't want to talk about, they just want to sort of push it aside because it's uncomfortable for them to see you.
But that's the definition of a fair weather friend. You can't just have people in your life are there when things are going good. You need the people to have you back. And I just find the women in my life can deal with that much better. And I have this sort of language with my more evolved friends where we say, what are you needing right now? Are you needing solutions or are you just needing to vent? And it's like, I just need to vent. Okay, go.
I love that question.
Me too.
I love that question.
I use it a lot and I never did before because my go-to was to fix. And I realized that that's an annoying trait if someone doesn't want it. So I don't want to give unsolicited advice. If they're asking for my opinion, I'll give it. But if they're not, I'm just going to have to let them vent.
Exactly. And I think really most people know what they need to do. Most people have an inner sense of what decision they need to make. They might just be resisting it or not wanting to face it. But when we're sort of stepping in trying to fix for someone, we're taking away their power to make decisions for their own life.
Yes. I heard Mel Robbins talking about that on Glennon Doyle's podcast, saying that she thinks she was helping a family, but she's taking away that from her children.
You're disempowering that person when you're fixing.
Yeah. The caveat to that, though, is if you're going on and on about the same thing that you know is bad for you. For example, I was in a domestic violent relationship from 2005 to 2010. And I would tell my friends, this is the same friend I'm talking about, my friend Liz, she's the tough, you know when you need the mirror friend who holds up the mirror or gives you the tough word. She will never, give you what you want to hear in the moment, but it's the one I go to when the chips are down. And she said, stop, we're upset. We're upset hearing this story. We keep telling you what you need to do to be safe and you keep going back, stop. And she was so, at the time, my ego hurt. She was spot on. I was hurting them, telling them stories about awful, horrible, violent things that were happening to me. And I just kept going back. And I don't blame myself. I've done a whole article about why you should never say to a woman, why did you stay so long?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Victim shaming and blaming is never going to motivate anyone to do anything.
But she was not wrong. She was not wrong. So I think it's good to talk the feelings out, but if you're going on and about the same thing and you're giving people advice and they keep not taking it, it's frustrating and it's hurtful for them to hear someone they love hurt.
Totally. And I think, domestic violence aside, because I think that's so complex.
Yes.
You've lived it, as you know.
That's
but I think, there's a fine line between enabling someone.
Yes.
And so it's that balance between I don't want to step in and fix them and disempower them to make their own decisions, but also I don't want to enable them.
I completely agree.
If this pattern of behaviour is not serving them.
Well, this emotionally intelligent friend I have always sees things from the other side. She'll listen to you and say, I can understand why that hurts you, but maybe that person's doing that because of that. And she's been doing that since she was 15. I don't know where she got that wisdom from at 15, but I was always surrounded by the, that's fucked. They shouldn't have done that. And it's like, okay, occasionally it's good to hear that when you really just want to vent about a work thing.
I mean, the one thing you need is honesty in relationships.
Yes.
You need honesty.
But I know people in my life who are a little bit negative and the people they're surrounded by are completely their enablers. And I'm like, you think they're helping you? They're actually not helping you.
No.
Me with the tough word, I'm giving you way more help.
Exactly. Yeah, you want the honesty. Even if it hurts, in the long term, you're going to want the honesty.
Yeah, delivered in a kind, compassionate way because I'm a little bit of a sensitive Cancerian.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great. What have you, on a personal level, what have you learned about yourself on your self-discovery journey?
Oh, so much. It's huge. Where does it end? I think I'm still learning. I don't think I'm there.
I think we're always still learning or we're done.
I think my journey is not over and it won't be till the day I take my last breath. I think that I've just learned recently I've been doing a lot of work around self-compassion, interestingly. But I think what I've learned the most and what I've probably developed the most is self-trust.
Oh, I love that.
Is that, I am entitled to live my life under my own terms. I'm entitled to set boundaries. I'm entitled to have my own voice and speak it and to be really confident and settled and content at the end of the day that I've lived my life on my terms and I trust my inner guidance and what feels right. So I think self-trust has been the biggest thing.
I talked about something on a solo episode recently about tapping into your intuition and listening to yourself too, and about how much we have just become accustomed to outsourcing opinions instead of really I did this example of how I was doing that celery diet that everyone was doing, the celery juice, and I blew out like I was 6 months pregnant and I kept pushing through and how rude to my body that was saying, excuse me, this isn't working.
How dare it?
There's really something to tapping into your intuition. What I'm discovering finding my voice has been an absolute huge thing in adulthood, as I've gotten older, and that's why I started this whole podcast. And I would like to say, not to give myself a pat on the back, but I've seen some very close women in my life develop more of a voice in the last year. And I truly believe this podcast has something to do with it, because I see, like, especially younger women in my life, it's almost, they go, you almost gave me permission to have my voice. And, just because someone's my family doesn't mean I have to just give them what they want. I can have boundaries and push back and find my voice. And I feel like, because I'll have friends in their 20s, and I feel like it's my responsibility in my 40s to pass down that wisdom. I wish I heard that more in my 20s. It was almost like I needed someone to give me permission to use my voice, that instead of being shamed for using my voice. What I'm not that you asked me, but I'm jumping into my conversation.
Tell me. No, share. I want to hear.
What I'm still working on, and I don't know if you've listened to the intro, but I call myself a recovering people pleaser because I'm not there yet. But how much I do things, and so many women in my life, for fear of letting other people down. And the worst person, I always say this to my friend, the worst person you can let down is yourself, because that's when you let others down, you feel a bit bad about it for about a day. When you let yourself down and you do, like if you go to something when you're burnt out and you don't want to, you're so angry, but you're angry with other people. But it's not their fault. You didn't listen to your intuition. And the people pleasing in the women in my life is just huge. And I think it's a real societal thing of how we were brought up to, always placate the men and make people comfortable, and always be a smiley woman and an agreeable woman. And it's just not relevant anymore.
Yeah, so true. And I'd probably say, and you've probably gone down this with a therapist or whatever you've worked on, but
she'll be on
like
tomorrow.
Oh, amazing. What we see with people who identify as people pleasers is that somewhere along the lifespan they've received a reward for just doing the right thing.
We all did something. We all got the pat on the head.
Going along or being the good girl, right? We always see the good girl becomes the people pleaser. So yeah, it's retraining yourself out of those patterns. And I think with boundaries, I think the minute that we just accept that they will be uncomfortable to set with some people, just accept the fact that boundaries are really tricky and hard. As soon as we accept that and do it anyway, in a compassionate and loving way, clear communication, if that person then has a problem with you setting a boundary, that's about them. That's got nothing to do with you. Deliver it in a way that is, as I said, clear, compassionate. And if they can't receive it, unfortunately, that's just work they've got to do. And
I was going to say that to you about what the boy wrote on your school shirt. That was about him. That's how he saw himself, and it was reflecting.
Wanting to bring someone else down, because he was obviously felt insecure or... Yeah, totally.
Great. Where can people find you if they want to know more? And I will link all your links in the show notes.
Yeah, so my website, which is just thestillspace.com.au. They can find me on Instagram, same name, The Still Space, AU at the end of that name. Facebook, all under my business name, and they can reach out to me anytime that way.
Excellent. It's all linked in the show notes. Before you go, I want to ask you my very favourite question to ask people. If you met 18-year-old Sammy today, what would you tell her?
I'd tell her it's all going to work out and you're enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do wish you could jump in a time machine and go back and just quell the fears. I was talking to, I don't know which podcast, about the inner child work, and I do a lot of taking a little step by the hand and being like, we got this. It is so comforting when you do that inner child work, but yeah.
It is. And it's, I think at 18, it's really interesting because you think you know everything, you think you got life figured out, and it's not until
it's a tough age.
You get down the line a little bit and you go, oh, gosh, I really knew nothing. And I'm sure I'll be at 60 reflecting back on here, coming closer to my 40s and think, oh, my gosh, I still knew nothing. You get that wisdom as you grow up. But it's such a confusing, uncertain time. You're trying to find your way in the world. You're just trying to navigate everything, becoming an adult. And I think it's just so confusing and overwhelming.
It is overwhelming because so many people are telling you who you should be. And every time you try to tap into your intuition, you usually get shamed for, no, that's not right. So it's confusing as hell.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's both. It's these polar opposites of like youth today, because it's harder because there's so much external validation and so much online. But I'm also seeing more confident young women that we didn't have with body positivity, wearing the G-string bikinis at any size. I mean, we didn't have that when we were in school. Everyone was stick thin on TV in the 90s. So I'm seeing good and bad.
Yeah, I definitely think we're much more inclusive in terms of body image, definitely all sizes, we're definitely seeing that. We're definitely seeing more empowered women. And I think that's because that shift in society, women's voices are finally
it's more women having a voice.
Being heard.
When we joined the workforce when we were 18, it was all men. You were just grabbing coffees and teas for everybody. You had no opinion, no input with things. No, you just weren't valued.
Yeah, and I even think back, to my mum's generation. She wanted to go off and do university when she left high school, but she was told, no, you'll go into secretarial college.
Yes,
you're a female. That's what you do.
That's what they did.
Yeah, you become a secretary. And then you have children.
Yeah.
And that is what you should be doing as a woman. There was no sort of, further education. And we look now, there's been such an amazing shift and change in that. I still think we have some way to go, but I think we're definitely on an amazing path where there's more inclusion, acceptance, and that gap is slowly closing, which is amazing to see.
Yeah. But it definitely is a hard age for self-esteem and everything. I love looking at photos of me as a child, and I look at photos of me 30 onwards. I think I looked great in my 30s. I don't like looking at any photos of me as a teen or in my 20s. And it's just, it's my face. I just think I lacked so much self-esteem. I looked insecure. And honestly, it gives me trauma when I see photos of myself at that age. I just wish she knew how valuable she was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sammy, thank you so much. I knew I'd enjoy our chat, but I really enjoyed it even more than I thought I would. So I really appreciate you spending your time with us today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and please do something for yourself in the next week to fill up your cup. See you next time. There is no resource more valuable than time, and I thank you for spending your time with us today. Your voice is so important, and we would love to hear which topics you would like discussed in future episodes. Please reach out by Instagram at Can I Get a Refill Podcast, or on our private Facebook group to let us know. If you enjoyed this or previous episodes, we would be so grateful if you could please subscribe, rate, and review to help our voices continue to be heard. Catch you in the next episode.